So take it away.
Hey, how's everybody doing? Thank you very much. I was pretty nervous all week because I didn't know what to expect, how many people, so it's plenty of people, but that's fine. Thank you for attending, and thank you very much for the invite to Mark and Imogen. Um, I even like told her like, you know what? I'm not talking about Drupal. Is that okay? And she said like, yeah, that's okay. So that said, and I don't want to disappoint anybody else, so I'm gonna try to be super clear and explicit. I created this talk um, for the company I used to work like a few weeks ago, which is Chromatic, and they put it in YouTube, and people seem to like it. And my intention for this talk is to be super practical about what is Tailwind, and in maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, you get to know like you get to have a big sense of what it is and how you can use it, and if it's a good fit for your project. That being said, like I don't think Tailwind CSS is the panacea or is a good fit for every project, but it's an interesting project that you can explore, and maybe if you like what you see, you can try in your own projects. So yeah, I'm just gonna start. So like many said or many know, like Tailwind CSS is a low-level utility class framework. So basically, you're using class names instead of CSS to write your CSS. I'm gonna put an example in a few minutes so you know what I mean. Oh, and by the way, I don't know what is the process. If you can raise the hand if you have like any questions. But usually, yeah, Amy June.
That's up to you. You can request that people hold the questions to the end, or they can put them in chat and interrupt you. It's really up to your workflow.
Okay. I don't know. I'm gonna let the meeting surprise me. So, yeah. So this is a high. I'm gonna continue and ask questions. If like anybody has any question, when I ask for the questions, you can interrupt me. So this is a high-level overview. My intention is for you not to be like a pro in Tailwind CSS, but to understand how it works. The scope of this talk also includes responsive classes. Also, I compile like a set of classes that are super useful, or the ones that I first learned. And then how to use Push CSS with some examples. So you can like create minimal builds of your CSS. So it's so your build only contains the classes that you need, and you don't need to like use all the CSS that comes with Tailwind. So I'm gonna dive into that. Also, one of the most powerful things about Tailwind CSS is that they have like this shareability. So it's easy to share your components. If you create a component in just like HTML, you can share that with a friend and it's gonna render the same. So that's very powerful from my point of view. Also, I'm gonna give you some resources, and I have some bonus for the end of the talk. So if you stick around. So yeah, so I'm gonna continue. Yeah, so the main question that I had when I started investigating or getting my feet wet into Tailwind CSS, is this a framework? It is a framework, but it's different. The main difference with frameworks like Bootstrap or Foundation is that only provides classes and it's only about CSS. So you don't have like any JavaScript, any like components, opinionated components. So it's like just classes, and then you can create the markup as you need it and want it, and they just throw some classes in there, and it's gonna be like styled. So that's what Tailwind CSS is. So like I said, it doesn't come with opinionated components. For example, if you use Bootstrap in the past, you have this nav bar, and then you need to adapt your menus, your menu, your logo and everything. You need to adapt it to the way that Bootstrap tells you to organize the components in order to render an app bar or an accordion or tabs or anything. So it's different, it's linear, and you can only take what you need. So that's the main difference. I have an example that I created. So I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna open this code pen and I'm gonna explain what I did. So this is a code pen. This is Tailwind. I've just required Tailwind, no compression or anything. So it's pulling Tailwind from a CDN. So you can start like, I don't know, testing stuff right in the browser. And as you can see, this is like all I have. So if I open the CSS file, so there is no CSS. So basically you can start like writing your markup, adding classes, and you're gonna get a result like this one. Yeah, so it seems like a lot to digest, like a lot of classes that you don't know. But I'm gonna provide an example. So for this one, I'm setting a container in the main element. And then the margin on the X axis is gonna be auto. So the container is set, and then everything is centered. And then as you can see, it's rendering one column, but I have this MD special class. That means that on breakpoint MD and above is gonna be, I'm gonna apply a grid, right? A CSS grid. So that's what I say, like Tailwind is think or be used responsibly. It's responsive and mobile first. So if you think on how your layout is gonna look on mobile, and then you start like adding classes to modify how that layout is gonna work in greater breakpoints. Like for example, if I reach the MD breakpoint, the medium, it's gonna be using the grid in 2 columns, and it's gonna have a gap of 6. I'm gonna explain those numbers, the spacing numbers. So yeah, I'm gonna request questions because I want to have a sense of if I'm going too fast or too slow or anything.
My only request is, could you increase your font size there in the code pen?
Yeah, I guess that works, right?
Yeah, that's even just that one little bump helps. Thank you.
Okay. Any other question?
How long does it take to really kind of like, this is you're creating a flexbox layout. How long did it take to really kind of understand the layouts that are provided by Tailwind and how to use them? Was it time consuming, or did you pick it up pretty quickly?
If you know how to CSS, you know how to use Tailwind. So if you understand the basics of grid and flex, then this is gonna be kind of transparent for you, because basically like the classes match CSS. So I'm gonna open the documentation. This is also useful. Yeah, so for example, if you go here, you go to flex, you're getting the properties. So flex row is matching flex direction row. And same things happened with the grid. So basically this class translates to these properties. So if you want to know exactly what's happening or how what CSS is being applied to your element, you can go to the documentation and you can see the class and the properties that are being added. Any other, did I answer your question?
So like you install Tailwind and then you just add the Tailwind classes to your divs,
A markup, yeah.
to your markup divs or whatnot.
Yes, yeah, I'm adding Tailwind CSS right here with the CDN. So this is the version, the past version, the version 1, but now version 2 is available. So I'm going to talk about that later. Yeah, basically you don't need to write CSS. You just need to add classes to your markup, and you're going to have like these kind of like results.
As long as you understand the Tailwind's syntax, you'll be good.
If you know how to CSS, you're going to connect the dots with Tailwind classes. And then it's going to be, once you learn those basic classes, then you don't need to watch even the documentation. I'm gonna set more examples.
Can I ask one more question regarding the CSS? So, I mean, it looks a lot like Bootstrap at this point, but one of the failings of Bootstrap is once you want to deviate from the Bootstrap layout, it becomes really impossible to work with. So are there contingencies that allow Tailwind to be more flexible than, say, Bootstrap?
Yes. I'm making annotations so I can get back to that later.
Okay.
I think it would be more beneficial if I keep my flow and then I return to your question. So it's about layout and columns, or just like, it's about columns or layout in general?
No, just anything related to the design, and like if you're making design changes and you're taking, concepts from, you might have a designer you're working with, and you're taking maybe even a Photoshop file, and you're making things look like the Photoshop file. The way that Bootstrap worked was very limiting, and it became a problematic sort of thing to work with because it kind of worked against you.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that. I do have an example where the layout is not conventional. So for example, this layout is super simple, but I do have an example that I created for a project that I have, a personal project, where my layout is not like simple and is not like the standard. So I can get that, I can get to that in a few minutes. So I'm gonna continue.
And Karen had a question about if you could share the URL.
Oh yeah. Which, this one? I'm gonna send the deck so you can see all the presentation. Let's wait. Okay, so I pasted the slides on the chat. You can open the deck and you can click on the links. And I'm also going to share this one, so you can play with it, fork it, or whatever. Shall I continue? Any other question? Okay, I'm going to continue. I guess that's yes. Yeah, so in this example, for example, I'm going to change the grid. So I want the grid to have 3 columns instead of 2. So you just need to change the class, save, and then your layout is going to change to 3 columns. And it's going to like auto adjust. So you can like you can prototype super quickly and have like something decent to show it to your, like, I don't know, client or whatever. I mean, if you're in a budget that is tight, like this might be a good option. Yeah, so I already mentioned this, but Tailwind is responsive. So Tailwind has 4 breakpoints by default, but you can customize this file. So this file, like if you set up Tailwind and you use it with Gold, Webpack, or whatever you use to compile your assets or your SaaS, you will have this file, tailwind.config.js, and you can customize the breakpoints. So for example, for you, MD starts in 900 pixels. So you can customize here and all the classes are going to be updated. So you don't need to do anything else. For instance, in one project, so I also created my resume on Tailwind and Gatsby. And I was basically deactivating what breakpoint. And I just needed to like update that file in order to deactivate or activate new breakpoints. And it's totally customizable. The first classes that I learned are these, the container, which basically like if I remove this container class from here, so everything is going to span full width. So I don't have a container, right? Just full width. If I add the container class back, oops, then I'm going to have the container again. I'm going to minimize this so you can see the container. I mean, you can see it, but you know that the container is there. Yeah, this looks like a lot of code, but if you're doing like components or whatever, so you can see that I'm repeating the cards. So it's the same markup. So it looks like a lot, but if you're using a system like Drupal, Laravel, Gatsby, whatever, React components, so you just create one and then you call that component and like iterate with your data or whatever you need. So this looks like a lot, but I actually like you just need these classes in these elements. Container MX auto, it has nothing to do with Mexico, is margin on the x-axis on the sides to be auto. So if I remove this, I'm gonna get a container, but then my div is not gonna be centered. So MX auto is the equivalent to margin 0 auto. Get it back, get my container center. Next one is margin. So if I say M, it's gonna apply a margin, well, let's say in 6. It's gonna apply a margin to all sides. Sorry about that. It's kind of hard to show with this resolution. Yeah, so as you can see, there is a margin. And also you can inspect here what is being added. So in this case, I wanted only the margin on the top and the bottom. So that's the y-axis. So I don't have like extra margin on the sides. And I can reduce the gap, and then the boxes are gonna have less gap between them, right? For these other ones, I'm using Flex. I have a margin button of 2. When, for example, here I have a margin button of 2 when I'm like in mobile, but then I remove the margin button, or I override the margin button to 0. I know this is a lot to digest, but these are like the classes that are most useful, or were more useful for me in the beginning. Also, it has rounded, which is the equivalent to border radius, BG to background color. And I don't know why these things. Yeah, so if you use this class, it's going to be the equivalent to this one. White, gray, BG gray, 11, 100, etc. And you have this palette of colors for free. So maybe if you're like, if you want to theme something super quickly and you don't have time to have a really like a good palette of colors, you can use these ones. It's gonna be a safe bet. I'm gonna ask for more questions right now. before I get to shareable components.
Well, I have more of a comment that you can actually customize those colors as well in that config file. I don't know if you're going to go into that or not.
No,
If,
that's
if you have a specific palette from your customer, you can actually adjust those colors, the color names, or add special names as well. That will make your life a little bit easier. Because memorizing BG blue 500 as the exact one is easier if you say BG color main.
yeah. So that again is in. I think that happens in this file.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
you can.
I want to make a quick comment also. One of the good things about Tailwind is that you can limit the styles. So basically, you use guardrails. So you are not you customize the classes that you can use. For example, for colors, you can either extend or just replace the colors completely on the tailwind.config.js file. So you can add colors or you can create your own classes for your own colors. The same for any class. You can create customize your classes or you can remove because Tailwind will give you a lot of them. So you can limit the options that your developers can utilize on Tailwind, and that way keep true to your design system. Stay true to your design system.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So I didn't think on getting into that, but that's super important. So yeah. So you can customize. Everything is in the documentation. They have a great documentation, and it was improved on the version 2. Any more questions or comments?
I had a question about the, so you had like the margin on the y-axis, and then that's like -4. So -4, like 4 refers to just like an increment. It's not, and can you change that?
Yes. So for example, everything is calculated on the EM. So let me get that documentation for you. I have it here. Yeah, so basically, one good thing about Tailwind is that everything is consistent. So if you use a margin 1 and then let me rephrase that. If you use a padding 1 and then a margin 1, the space is going to be the same. And your design and your implementation is going to look super consistent. And it's because all the values are based on the rem, on these rem values. So, and everything is based on the number 16. So 16 is set by default globally. And then all these values are calculated based on this global value, which is 16 pixels in the body. So if you use P1, it's going to be the equivalent to 4 pixels, unless you customize this number. You can also customize that number. And then
Cool.
in this table, you have like the equivalents and the visual display of what is the value for that, for example, 48 or 52 or 7, which is this. I don't know, it's really like X scales, and it's, I don't know, maybe if your design says like 255 pixels, you're gonna safely use a, I don't know, a width 64, for example, W64, which stands for width.
Is it kind of dangerous to go in and customize the I guess I don't know if you call it a framework, but if you go in and customize Tailwind, because that's the video I was watching about customizing Tailwind, and they were like, you know, if you do this, this might happen, and then if you do this, this might happen, and then you have to correct this.
I wouldn't customize it unless it's super necessary. I will try to match my designs to this like scale, or ask the designer to design based on 16 pixels or whatever. But even like you can customize it in here. So you can set like what is going to be the default value, like 16 pixels for, in this case, for large breakpoints. And the second reason I wouldn't customize that is because you lose something that is really important for me, which is shareability. So, and that's the next topic on my talk. Any other question? Okay, then I'm gonna get to shareable components. If Tailwind is not customized, you can share and use other people components. And this is also like the way the guys that created the framework are trying to monetize this like open source project. So they have like these premium Tailwind components. Is named Tailwind UI. And actually you can pre-order. And something that is crazy that I was reading in the blog post that they like made like $1.8 million by just like selling those components that are not ready yet. So that's pretty amazing. I don't know. Blew my mind. So in the example that I have for this presentation, I found this website, which is Tailwind Components. I don't know. And you can search like these components are made by other people. They are open source. You can copy paste and they're gonna work. There are like some that are like really good. Like this is the first time that I see this one, and you can check the code. And if you copy and paste this, it should look the same. So I don't know if this is gonna work. We're not gonna try. So I live dangerously, right? So let's try to copy this and put it in my Kotlin. Let's see what breaks. Yeah, so that's awesome. Just by copying markup, I didn't have to include anything extra. It's just like plain all HTML with classes. I was able to like this is not perfect, but yeah, it's super close to what was advertised on the other page, like this one. So for me, this is when I realized about this shareability ability of Tailwind, I was like sold. I was like, oh, this is really cool. I do have an example. So this one, I like this component a lot. So I don't know why I keep zooming. So I like this component, right? So the client asked for a quotes slider or whatever. And I don't feel like I want to do everything from the ground up. And plus, like, let's say that the client is using Gatsby.js or React. I did that already. I pasted that code and I just like changed class for class name. This is React. And then when I compile everything, it's gonna be displayed like, no, wait, oh, too many tabs open. Yeah, so this is my personal site. I just copy paste the markup. I adapted to React, just changing class to class name. And then I have the same component working in a different platform from another person that I don't know. So thank you, a stranger, for your work. And that's how you can like share components. Yeah, so in my original presentation, I did the same. So I copied the text and then I put it in Gatsby. So as you can see, it says Gatsby here. And it's just basically the same. So that's why I wouldn't like customize the sizes for like the global sizing for Tailwind. Yeah, before I proceed, I'm gonna ask for another round of questions, see if I can answer them.
Well, have you tried experimenting with changing the sizing and seeing what those pre-customized ones do? Maybe it's an effect that you want.
No, I haven't. but that's interesting.
I'm all for breaking stuff if you can, so that's why.
What was that?
I'm all for breaking things if you can. So what happens when you turn that knob?
I think it's just gonna like increase the spacing. I don't have an example right now. We can leave that for the end of the meeting. So if we have some time, we can experiment. Or we can do a coding session and break stuff.
A very safe way to customize it would be to not change the values for the variables, but just limit what the available variables are for you, or the available classes are for your team, so that you don't have complete freedom to have a lot of variance. So you are constrained to certain classes and certain spacing or certain margins or certain colors, and that way, even though they may be the same that everybody else is using, you're only using a subset of them, and that way you keep consistency in your project. And also, customizing colors could probably, if you use the same classes, you just change the values for your primary or secondary colors or something like that. That would also be safe if you import a component made by somebody else. It would just take your colors, right?
Yeah, I wasn't trying to get too deep into customization of Tailwind, and I think it's out of the scope of this presentation. Also, I think there is like a lot of like YouTube videos where you can, or documentation in the site where you can like see what happened, like if you increase the global size, or see how to customize, how to limit your CSS. And even like after the presentation, we can discuss it and we can try stuff if you want. Any other question? Okay, next one. The first time that I used Tailwind, my mistake was that I wasn't purging the CSS. Purge CSS is basically, it reads your templates and see which classes you are using, and then removes all the classes from your CSS that you're not using. So you can have like a lean CSS file, super small. This is not like tied to Tailwind. So this is another open source project. You can use it with another tools. And here's the documentation. You can use it with Vue, Nux, React, etc., WordPress. It's a shame that it doesn't say like Drupal here. We need to do something, right? And I have examples, also screenshots. Yeah, so before I minimize my CSS, like the whole like Tailwind CSS library was weighing almost 5 megabytes. And that's a lot. So it's not performance friendly. So I realized that when I started like doing the Lighthouse test, and I was like, wow, this is not right. Something's wrong here. So I figured out how to minimize my builds. And I went from almost 5 megabytes to 10 kilobytes. And I have also, so for example, I have another project here where if I run, like if I'm like developing, Tailwind is gonna be like 2 megabytes, 2.5 megabytes. And after I apply the Push CSS configuration, so see how long it takes. It's like almost 4 megabytes, yeah. So my CSS right now is almost 4 megabytes. But then if I run prod, where I pass the Push CSS true value, my application is gonna get down to 20 kilobytes. And I'm gonna show you that application. So it's 20 kilobytes. Yeah, so Push CSS basically you configure your tailwind.config.js file. You tell Tailwind where to look for your templates. In this case, this is a project made in Laravel. So I say, okay, go to resources, views, into this folder, like inspect all these blade templates, extract the classes, and generate a CSS file that is optimized for the web. And the result is this one. So this is my app. It's built with Tailwind CSS. It's responsive. And it's optimized. It's a Laravel site. And it's only like my CSS is only 20 kilobytes, like as you can see here. And it includes like all CSS, like also these internal pages. For example, if you're using Gatsby, you can use this plugin, super easy to configure. If not, you can check the documentation. It's like plenty of documentation for Push CSS to be configured in your setup. I want to try this with Drupal in the future, but the support for Twig, it doesn't seem to be like really good. I don't know if that changed. Last time I checked, it was like 2 months ago. And yeah, so any questions about Push CSS?
Yes, I just wanted to say something. I am struggling a little bit with this Push CSS. The way I am using Tailwind in Drupal, it's within maybe, you know, Emulsify.
Yeah, I never worked with.
Yes, it's funny because it's a BEM system, but I quite like this component way of in its structures, and I was used to work with it, and so I added Tailwind, and it works quite well with all the twigs and like this. Only with the Push CSS and especially with the Tailwind 2, I am not yet fully satisfied with my solution. And though maybe if, I don't know if I can contact you or if you are interested to share some experience with Emulsify or like this in Tailwind in Drupal.
I tried to. So I had a project that used handlebars, which is JavaScript template library. And for that project, there is not like processor for the templates, but there is a way to create your own processor for the templates. So that's what I mentioned, Twig. I think nobody, or like, I don't know if at this point is somebody that is creating that parser for the templates. And maybe that's why you're not getting the results that you need, because the Twig templates are not being parsed. And what I say about parse is like, basically you create a plugin for Node.js that reads your templates and extracts the classes. And if the current ones are not filling your needs, you need to create your own parser for post CSS. No, for push CSS. Custom extractor, yeah, something like that. Yeah, the extractors. So there is a extractor for React, HTML, JavaScript, Twig. Yeah, so this is the, maybe you need to use this extractor in order to get the classes from Twig and then get the push CSS working correctly.
Oh, that's very interesting. I missed that one. Thank you. Thank you.
In Laravel, I'm using this one. I mean, I don't need to configure it because it's a dependency of my install and it works like just fine. Like all classes, everything is working good. Any other question? Oh, you have any more questions?
No, for me, it's fine.
Okay, cool. Any other question? before I proceed, I'm about to finish. I'm close to the end. Okay, I guess that means no. Yeah, so I had a question a few minutes ago. Like what happens like if you have a layout that is not like the standard layout, like everything is a box and all the boxes are piled up. And so my designer gave me this layout, which is like, so as you can see, this is hovering, like this is the main container, and then I'm positioning this element above the other container, etc., etc. So I was able to do this with Tailwind. So it's possible. Like I said at the beginning, like if you know CSS and you know how to position elements, like absolutely, or yeah, if you know how to position elements like relative and absolutely, you can do this kind of layouts. And of course, it's also responsive. So same markup, no JavaScript to reorder stuff or whatever. And this will be a good example of how to like do templates or like styles that are not like normal. I'm gonna share a little bit of resources. So Tailwind CSS as documentation. Yeah, somebody has any question?
Thanks so much. This was really good.
Thank you. Yeah, so in the resources I have Tailwind CSS. Yeah, main documentation is good. Go there, like if you're in doubt, go Tailwind CSS. I also like this one, the Tailwind components one. Is the one where I extract stuff like for free. So I don't need to like replicate everything. Like sometimes like I copy, paste, and then I start customizing. But there is like a lot of good stuff in here. There are probably more and better, but this is good enough for me. Yeah, so this is really interesting, for example. And then you can test like in different breakpoints. Oops. I think this was a bad example. And also like, there is also like an awesome Tailwind CSS list, and you have a lot of resources in here. So
Where are your links to all this?
yeah, so I pasted in the chat my talk, and if you like navigate the talk, there are the links. If not, I can share those in a moment.
I'm also going to share the links in the Drupal Badcamp, the Drupal Slack on the Badcamp channel, and in the Badcamp Slack.
Thanks.
And I would like to end my talk with this thought, because so Tailwind is creating a lot of criticism, because not all technology is going to appeal to everybody. And I think we also, like in the Drupal community, we are not like loved by everybody. So same thing is happening with Tailwind CSS. So I'm dropping these links also. So if you want to know the downsides or why some people doesn't like Tailwind, so you have like both sides of the coin. You have both sides of the story, and you make a good decision where you're trying to implement Tailwind in a project or not, or see if it's a good fit for your project. And I'm open to questions. If the questions are about customization, I'm not the expert, so I'm using like plain. I have done like only like easy stuff from my point of view. But if you have like any questions that I can answer, I'm happily gonna do it.
I think it was a very good presentation.
Thank you.
I give you a lot of kudos for. I think you made it very concise, very easy to understand.
Thank you very much.
I had a question about, so if you are creating a component that you know, when you add those long string like utility classes, and then you want to do that again because you want to kind of reuse that same design in something else, but you don't want to rewrite all of those utility classes or, miss one, get one wrong, and so forth. How would you go about it to do that?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's something that I forgot, and I thought like I need to talk about this if I have time. Yeah, so I think your solution will be something like this. So in that application that I'm showing, Architectio, I was tired of recreating the styles for every form. So as you can see, these forms have no classes, right? But they are styled with Tailwind components. So then you need to customize your setup. And I'm basically creating a CSS file. And I'm applying Tailwind styles for all the buttons, all the inputs, sorry. So as you can see here, all the input of type text is gonna get a BG gray 1100. It's gonna have this border. It's gonna have this padding. And then I don't need to like apply these classes to those elements. And then you can have like clean markup.
Yeah, that's actually the apply functionality of Tailwind is what really drew me to it. Because my main problem with Bootstrap and Tailwind is it's not semantic. Like all that stuff is very good shorthand and it makes sense once you learn it. But if it's a card, why aren't we just calling it the class of card? And then you can use the apply functionality of Tailwind, and Post CSS is another thing that it uses to build on that. And you can actually apply the Tailwind classes to your components, to your main classes, and then just use that class. Sometimes it's unnecessary. Like out of the box, Tailwind is very powerful. But again, if you want to be semantic, have semantic web, you want to use this apply. And then also with Post CSS, which is a compiler, you can do things like embed, like the SAS look where you have the main card and then say all card images will look like this and apply that to there as well. And Post CSS is really, and
It's powerful.
Post CSS.
Yeah.
And that's like another. It's like Gulp or Grunt or all those other ones that are Node or npm builders.
Yeah, another advantage is that you can use these libraries. For example, I'm using nested, so I can write CSS like is SAS. So as you can see, I have nested selectors, and also, yeah, so I'm using Tailwind, nested, and import, and auto prefixer. And yeah, so I'm writing CSS like is SAS. And also another thing that is super interesting is like if you want to, like, you can combine those like those classes from Tailwind with plain old CSS. So it's flexible. So it's nothing that prevents you to do this kind of stuff, like
the only thing
other
though,
stuff.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I was just gonna say the problem with that is that right, like that's extremely ripe for abuse, right? Like you could quickly go from having the constraints of Tailwind, which are arguably one of its best assets, and begin to break them. And you could also using apply for sure will be semantic, but like you would never. You can't really partake of the broader ecosystem after that, right? Because now you've converted well-documented utility classes into, maybe poorly documented unique classes that only you are aware of. So, there's a risk involved in using apply, and particularly if you're going to mix in your own CSS.
Yeah, in my case, I did it to avoid repetition, and I was only like, so this is the only file that I have in like all that application. and it's including tables, labels, and inputs. So the forms are like, I don't need to worry about a form rendering wrong. But yeah, you're right. And those kind of arguments are included in the last like part of my like slide of my session. And people also like that is against Tailwind complaints about that. So it's, yeah, like I say, it's worth to read it and see if this is a good fit for you. I'm not trying to convince anyone. I'm just trying to lay what I get to understand so far about the technology. For me, it has a lot of value. For some other people, it's gonna be not that valuable. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing right now and we can continue discussing, or I'm gonna call it.
Hey,
That's good.
ta-da!
Don't leave. I was loving this.
I'll,
What was
I am
that?
I am going to stop the recording. So.
Okay.